Welcome back to the next episode of the Energize with Bram podcast. And this podcast is specifically designed for you, entrepreneurs, business owners, and business leaders overall, who are always looking for ways to improve, to grow, and to also have an impact in society. This podcast is designed for you because yes, you need the know-how. Yes, you need the skills. Yes, you need the mindset to go off and do something extraordinary out there. And today, guess what? I haven't invited anyone else but myself. I'm going to be sitting on the couch here with you today and talk about this book here, How to Communicate for Results and Feel Great. You can also see who is the author of this book. And I just want to walk you through some of the myths that all of us got taught wrongly. And I want to debunk them once and for all with you. Very often, even on the weekends, I get invited to speak on the topic of communication and how to impact people through the words we use, the way we connect with them, the way that we build relationship, rapport, and trust, and so on. Basically, this is what I've been doing for the last 13 years in my crash course, Communication Mastery. But very often I get invited over to speak about this topic, about the subtleties of language and how people actually either get along and connect or where they drifting apart and have misunderstandings, challenges, difficulties, and so on and so forth. And here's the interesting bit. Well, it's all predictable, whether it's going to be working well or not. And if it's going to be working wrongly, it's even preventable in advance if you know what to look out for in the situation, given the people involved. So it's predictable and preventable to have failure in advance. Wouldn't it be worth having a bit of time together to talk about this stuff? I think so, and certainly many other people that have come through and have watched me present on the topic, they keep saying the same thing too. So, with that being said, we're going to have a look at this book here. You can find it on my website if any time you wonder where to find it. But at chapter 17, there's a few myths that we want to debunk. And before I actually get there together with you, there's 12 of those myths. There's one that comes just before it, a good starting point. First of all, whether you were born like me in Belgium, or in Sri Lanka, or China, or Australia, or New Zealand, or France, or Germany, or UK, or US, or Canada, it doesn't matter. Whenever I ask people in a room, who here has been taught to treat people the way that you personally want to be treated? All of the hands go up. All of them. No matter where I've asked and where people come from. We all get taught. We get brainwashed to believe certain things. And in this case, if you do this, statistically, scientifically speaking, you set yourself up more for failure in advance than success. So why would you ever support something like that or live your life in line with a rule that is setting yourself up for failure in advance? That doesn't make sense, does it? Let me now back this up. In a country like Australia, if you are highly compliant, very data driven, very information savvy and hungry, and you base your decisions on facts, figures, data, graphs, and research, statistically speaking, it's proven that you will only find roughly 12% of fellow Australians to be like you, to speak like you, to value things like you, to see respect the way you see it, to make decisions the way you do them, based on facts and figures and the likes, rather than emotions. Which means 88% of all of the other people are not like you. They think differently. They feel differently. They value things differently. They buy differently. They make decisions differently. They deal with change differently. Isn't that in itself enough proof to start thinking differently and get rid of this old adage of treat people the way that you want to be treated? If I'm only relating to 12% of Australians and alienating 88% of them, clearly the rule isn't designed to work. Let's now go to the next group. The second smallest group is people that are very focused on winning, very competitive, very strong-willed, very dominant, very direct in the way they communicate. Sometimes they come across as blunt, aggressive, and intimidating. They are very time conscious and always in a hurry, very urgency driven. It can't go fast enough for their liking. They'll easily talk about certain people, how they're wasting their time and going too slow, and it frustrates the hell out of them. Guess what? 18% of people in Australia are like them. 82% are not. They're different. Therefore, once again, if this person in this color, basically red, would continue to speak to people and relate to them and build relationships with them the way that they personally want to be related to, they're setting themselves up more for failure in advance than success. And for people that like to win, I personally prefer a strike rate of 100% over 18. What about you? Let me know. Next group is what we call the greens. The greens, and I'm not talking political fractions here, but the greens on the discs are about 34% of Australians. They are very warm and nurturing and relaxed and easygoing, and they like people, and they're also more listeners than talkers. They're very empathetic. They're very good at nurturing people and looking after them and taking people under their wing and include people. And the thing of political inclusion and work health and safety and the likes, that's very much in these people's corner. You can imagine if you're like this and you also treat people the way that you want to be treated, you're going to be going in with an easygoing, relaxed manner, whether it works or not. So your pace might be too slow for other people's liking, and that could create tension and make you fall apart. The other thing is that if you're so focused on people and doing right by them and including people and asking people's opinion and making sure that people feel looked after and warm and respected and liked and so on, if this is really important to you, you can imagine that you're going to easily find time for people, sometimes at the expense of important things that have to be done later. And also, if you're a bit of a people pleaser, you might take on too much for you to chew on, therefore getting stuck and running out of time. And then things get messy. Then your processes start to be affected by it. Whatever you said you would do, you can't deliver on time and to the quality levels that you'd like to do it. And so now you're falling behind. Guess what? 34% of Australians are in that particular bucket. It's the green one. We call it the S on disc. The last one is actually the largest group of people. We're talking about the yellows. 36% of Australians are yellows. And they are flamboyant, very outgoing, highly extroverted, energetic, potentially loud. They like having fun. They like cutting a joke. And they really love talking to people, whether they're people they already know or people that are complete strangers. They can see the good in people and they're very easy to chat to anyone. Now, you can imagine if somebody with this very frivolous, very outgoing mindset, where they always see the seed of good in everything and everyone, the glass is half full, this positivity, you can imagine put this person together with somebody else who's very skeptical, very data driven, very factual and logical, versus this person who's very outgoing and emotional and intuitive and creative. That these people are each other's opposites. They communicate in a day and a night difference. And therefore, if you keep treating people the way that you want to be treated personally, you'll set yourself up for failure in advance more so than success. So please, change the rule. Get rid of the old adage and replace it with another one where all the words are equal, bar one. And that one word that is different is where you replace the you with they. So instead of treat people the way that you want to be treated, you treat people the way that they want to be treated. Now we're making inroads. Now we're starting to change our approach. Now we're adapting to a situation rather than enforcing our own way, whether it sticks or not, whether it works or not. And we've already said the data speaks volumes. For most people, knowing that most of us speak one or two out of the four languages, we miss the boat more often than we actually hit it. Even at the best of combinations, where you have yellow and green combined, which is I and S combined, you still only have a potential strike rate of 7 out of 10 people in Australia. Some countries, those statistics are slightly different, but that is basically what we're looking at, which means if you find that most of the time you get along with everyone, where you work together with colleagues and you deal with certain clients, and most of them, it's easy, it's fun, it works well, there's always a few people that just do your head and they press your buttons. They make you feel awkward and you don't feel that you're connected to each other. That's the 3 out of 10 in that situation. But for all of the others, it's far less effectiveness and far more ineffectiveness. So my point of this is, if it is important for you to get results, reach positive outcomes, create win-win-win situations, and feel comfortable no matter who, no matter what happens, be happy in your own skin, no matter how people speak to you or relate to you or communicate to you. That you don't take things personally when somebody says something the wrong way, or where you know how to interpret it, where it's coming from. If this is at least something that would add value to you, stay on. This is now where we're going to dive into some of the other myths that all of us got taught wrongly. As we're picking up this book, which you can find on my website, bramlagrou.com, it's called How to Communicate for Results and Feel Great. Chapter 17 talks about 12 other myths to debunk. And so the first myth there is that DISC is about personality. The challenges with personalities is that we think of them as static, meaning that we can't change them, that they're locked in and it's black and white, like genes, that the genes are programmed, that the personality is programmed. And then we have the whole nurture versus nature debate. It's very easy to go into black and white thinking. It's not a good idea. I would rather have you think of DISC as a tool to help you build relationships, trust, rapport, goodwill, and outcomes, scientifically speaking. There's both a science as well as an art to it. And as you can imagine, if we were to use an analogy of 4 languages in the world, there's obviously plenty more, but let's just say that we distill the whole world down to one of 4 languages. To make it easy, let's just say one would be Chinese, one would be Hindi, one would be English, and one would be Spanish, just as an example, right? If these are the 4 languages, would you be able to connect with everyone around the planet if you only speak 1 or 2 of those languages? Duh. The answer is, of course, no. You would not be able to connect with other people whose language you don't speak or master. Therefore, it's important, if you want to influence people, if you want to work with people, if you want to transcend personal differences and find more communality and be able to work with anyone and reach good outcomes. If this is important to you, then you need all the languages. But most of us, we're not born with them. So we got to free up the time and make the effort to learn to add 1 other or 2 or 3 more languages to our skill set. If this so far resonates, great. The analogy is there to prove a point. Most of us have 1 or 2 of those languages that we master in terms of the DISC, which means that we are missing out on 2, if not 3 of the other languages. Once again, we are not used to this. to speak in a way that is different to what we're used to. So we got to get out of our own way to get there. And rather than personalities, DISC is flexible. DISC moves. When you do a DISC assessment today and you've done one 10 years ago, chances are that your DISC now will be different from the one you did 10 years ago, which shows that people change and adapt over time. Here's the thing. Life circumstances, for example, your work environment and the people you work with and the expectations that people have of you will affect your DISC style. Equally, if you went through certain trauma or certain life-changing experiences, or you have had certain relationships from a loving nature that panned out in a certain way, or another life-changing experience, you became a parent or you got married, all of these things, they affect how you deal with other people in life, right? And so DISC is not personality. DISC is fluent. What is true, though, is that people are habitual. We got habituated to doing things in a certain way. And so then the question is, how well have you learned to read those habits of people so that you can use that knowledge and information to your advantage, but also to make sure that it benefits them? Especially when you're a leader, a business owner, this is important that you get right, because your success will largely depend on the way that you engage your stakeholders. Your stakeholders will be staff, existing and future ones. It also will be your suppliers, your referral partners, the people that actually supporting your business. Those relationships can either help or hurt. And your ability to build connections with other people, no matter how they present themselves, is vital. It's not personality. DISC is fluent. DISC is situational. And it's just a matter of you learning how to read the situation and then act in a way that will be supportive of that situation. So that's the first myth that we wanted to debunk. The second myth here is that you should mirror their behavior. We've all heard it. If you learn communication stuff and presenting and negotiating courses and the likes, very often people suggest us to mirror other people. Now, question for you. This is a trick question. Imagine that someone presents themselves as very angry while you're in their presence. They're angry. It might be because of something you said or didn't do, or it might have nothing to do with you, but they just are angry for something else. You just happen to be around them. If you then were to mirror their body language, what do you think will happen? You'll get punched, probably, or they'll get even more aggressive because you're throwing oil on the fire, and that makes it worse. The analogy here was to make the point that you cannot just mirror everything. There's only 3 things you'll ever mirror, and that's pace, priority, and language. Now, to make them very quick to understand, pace means if I'm really go and you're like super relaxed and easygoing, and I'm running 100 miles an hour, and I just want to get this thing done in the next 2 minutes. If you then try to have a social chit chat with me and taking me away from the very thing that I want to finish, you can already see that we are not really aligned. One is very easygoing and is wanting to have a chat about people stuff, whilst the other person is wanting to get things done and do it very quickly. And it's a task-related thing. In this example that I just described you, the 2 people involved were different in terms of pace. One was relaxed, one was in a hurry. And the other thing is that one was focused on getting a task done, and the other one was focused on getting social chit-chat happening, meaning people-focused. This is basically the difference. So what we do want to do instead is to mirror the priority. If somebody is laid back, going laid back. If somebody is focusing on a task and getting it done, focus on the task together with them. If they're more people friendly, go in with people. If they are more task based, go in with task. It's simple that way. So mirror pace, mirror priority, which is either people or task. And then the last one is language. Example, when you and I go to see a doctor, whenever they prescribe medication, first of all, the medication is a word that most common people, common folks, so to speak, cannot relate to. It doesn't say anything. Equally, when you start reading the explanations behind it and the ingredients in it, it's gibberish. It's very often Latin. It's not common language or everyday speak. And this is exactly how doctors tend to explain themselves. They tend to explain themselves in a very analytical, very dry, matter-of-fact, logical sort of language, which is very clinical for all of the people that are not like them. 88%, remember, of the Australian population are different to C. So, with that being said, so the language now that we want to mirror is we want to mirror the words people use. You notice that when people write an essay, they use certain words. When they write a prescription, they use certain words. When we write a text message, we use certain words. And when we write an email, we use certain words. The point of it is, in the words we select, we show literally our true colors on the disc. If I'm talking about information, research, due diligence, doing my investigations, doing my analysis, thinking it through, taking time to process the information, looking at the facts, the data, the figures, the stats, thinking it through. Notice what I'm doing. This is C-speak. This is language that is related to the blue style on the disc, which only 12% of the Australian population have and speak and therefore relate to. Contrast this with the very flamboyant high eye, the yellow. They'll talk about having fun, entertaining people, getting along, catching up, having a coffee, going to networking, influencing people, doing a podcast, changing lives, making a difference, creating a dent in the universe, things like that. They will use very emotional language like amazing, magic, life-changing, game-changing, vibrant, innovative, out of the box, very different. And they use all of these words in a very positive context. Notice now that one word for the last person I mentioned, like risk versus risk for the first person I mentioned being the blue, have two very different connotations. For the blue, risk is a negative. You want to avoid it by all means. You want to mitigate risks. You want to take all of the guesswork out of it, do your due diligence so that there's no more risks involved or very few. So it's something that has to be eradicated. There's a war on risk for certain people. For the second group, the yellows, the vibrant, the color, the charismatic, the outgoing people, the entertainers and the likes, risk is just hard. There needs to be pain in the game. There's no game if there's no pain. Risk is part of the pain. It's part of trial and error. You just start somewhere, you have a go at something, and you learn from the mistakes and the lessons learned along the way. Risk, therefore, is a positive. Sometimes it's even seen as something that is more exciting in the world of an eye. Notice now, these two people are each other's opposites. They are so far apart and they use different language. And so the question now is, would it be smart for you to speak the other person's language? Would it be helping you to connect more easily? Yes, it would. Would it make them feel more comfortable with you? Yes, it would. Would it help you to get outcomes more easily? Yes, it would. But the point is, you got to learn to speak those languages because chances are that you haven't got a DNA gene for it. It's something you learn. It's a learned skill. And so mastery over other languages within the disc realm is something that you can develop. So this was now myth 2. Let's now go to myth 3. Respect is universal. We sometimes think that What you find respectful is what other people will find respectful. But guess what? It doesn't work that way. Some of you guys and ladies who's listening or watching, you will think that respect means that you share what you think very quickly. You shoot from the hip. If somebody asks you a question, that you just straight away say what you think and you speak up. That would be respectful. It would be disrespectful in your point of view to withhold your thoughts and keep your cards to your chest and not share with the group where you're at. You would find that quite insulting, and actually that would be almost like a team player not pulling their weight. They're not contributing back to the team. On the flip side, we have other people where they think that speaking too quickly without having thought it through is flippant. You would find that disrespectful because you think that when somebody says, it should be meaningful, it should be thought through, it should be based on facts and figures and based on having done your homework. Thinking it through, so to speak. So you think before you act, whilst the previous group acts and then starts learning from the process. Notice now, they look at it very differently. Anytime when you were thrown in the deep end where you were asked to do some team building activity, you and I know that some people were quick to act and others wanted to learn more and think it through and plan before they did anything. Notice now, this is again a clash of different styles on the disc. And so respectful here is just a matter of where you're coming from, what color you have when you're coming from that angle. If you think that it's respectful to first warm up and learn about the person before you start jumping into the business at hand, then that is your colored, your preconceived idea, your cognitive bias that small talk is common and is right to do. Guess what? In a country like Australia, small talk will only help to set you up for success about 70% of the time. It also then means that 30% of the time you'll shoot yourself in the foot by doing small talk at the start with a stranger. So, respect is not universal. It's a myth. So get rid of that thinking. Myth 4 then is fake it until you make it. Have you ever heard that one before? I certainly have. And I just want to share with you that there's really power in words. And let's just be honest. If you are a good-meaning citizen, if you are a good-meaning worker, if you are a good-meaning business owner or executive or senior leader, would you ever want to fake things? Does that feel congruent with your value system? Faking? I don't like faking. I like learning. I like practicing. I like rehearsing, but I don't like faking. Faking makes me feel inauthentic. It makes me feel unreal. And therefore, I'm feeling disingenuous when I'm doing this with another person. Are you seeing where I'm coming from? The point of it is, be very careful with the things that you let into your head, the thoughts, the beliefs, the mantras, and the dogmas. Be careful with them because you don't want to fake it until you make it. You want to learn, you want to practice, you want to rehearse, you want to get better at it. You want to develop your skill sets. That's what you want to do instead, right? So just learn and grow. Use positive affirmations if you want that are a lot better than that and say, look, every day in every way, I'm getting better and better at this. The more I practice, the more I rehearse, the better I get. Every time when I fall over, I get myself up and I learn from the experience and therefore I get better. These things, they help. So be very mindful in terms of how you train your brain. Myth 5 now is paraphrase what they said in your words. Now, I'm not sure if you guys remember, but my background is in psychology. I trained as a psychologist and I am effectively, by the University of Ghent in Belgium, a psychologist for clinical purposes. And one thing that we got taught as professionals, as counselors and coaches and psychologists, we got taught to listen to a patient in this case. And whenever they said something, to summarize what we heard him say to us in our own words and then give it back to him, to prove that we listen, but also to check in whether we got the picture right or not. And here's the challenge now. Very early in my career, as soon as I started working as a consultant and advising major corporations and SMEs around the place, I noticed very easily that when I paraphrase in my own words as I got taught as a psychologist, if I did that with a client, very often a client would say, yeah, it's like that, Bram, but not quite. And they would correct me in my wording. Not if I use my words and they sound different to their words, there's room for objections in advance. There's room for failure baked in. Why? Because my words sound different to their words if I summarize it differently. I call this red flags. If somebody has the slightest opportunity to pull a red flag in front of you, you're setting yourself up for failure, and that hurts. So don't do that. What you want to do is reverse engineer it. The smarter way is to only pull up green flags by the other person. And the way you do that is by something that I invented. It's a tool or a concept called CPA. It has nothing to do with accounting for anyone who considers that. But the CPA is an acronym that stands for the copy-paste approach. CPA, copy-paste approach. Now, if I summarize a situation using their words and I've jotted them down on my paper, question to you now, it's a trick question. Can the other person object with my summary if all they're hearing is their own words? You hear what I'm coming from, right? They cannot object to the very words that they've given you in advance. Therefore, there's no red flags, there's no issues, there's no misunderstandings, there's no challenges, there's no corrections to be made. All there is agreement. It's a tick. You get a seal of approval, and they have heard their words coming out of your mouth, which means you sound more equal rather than sound more different. Does that make sense so far? So, paraphrasing with your own words is not a good strategy. Paraphrase it with their words is a lot more success oriented. Next one, myth 6, over here, says that DISC is about pigeonholing people. Let's face it, if you've ever done a DISC course of some kind with someone else, very often I would suggest that it was airy-fairy, wishy-washy, is where there's no value or very little value in it, is where you get taught what your style is and somebody else's, and then we have a bit of a giggle, so I'm this and you're that, and nothing changes. All there is, we pigeonhole people, I'm this and you're that, and it's not really considering the situation. If you marked my words from earlier in the podcast episode, I said that most of us have one or two styles on the DISC that is pretty high, that is quite well developed, that is quite dominant, which means if a person that you're dealing with has two styles that are quite dominant, it means that in one moment, you might see that one style in your face with all of the clues and vital signs of it. But later on, when, for example, the job is done and everybody relaxes, they slip into the other style, the secondary style. You now notice, of course, is that if you pigeonhole them, you might just be so focused on that one style and just keep, numbing your brain with it, being oblivious to and not observing that things have changed. They've moved into a different style of theirs. And so if you don't respond appropriately to the secondary style, you will again have a misunderstanding or a challenge or a difficulty emerging because you're disconnecting again, you're drifting apart. So it's not about pigeonholing people. People are fluent, and many of us, yes, are a mixture of, but most of us really have one or two styles only. Less people have three, and even more people, and even less people have four styles. on the disc that is quite highly developed. So mastery for most of us is in one or two only. So if it's on one or two only, don't stare yourself blind on them, but always focus on what are the signs that people are emitting. How are they coming across right now? And relate to that. Learn how to speak that language if you haven't got it yet. And if it then changes, go with the change, move along, be fluent rather than static. Myth number 7 now says trust your gut feeling when hiring employees. Now, this is one of my favorites. For all your recruiters, HR people, and yes, business owners who are also recruiting people, but also senior leaders. There is going to be a stage where you will be called in to do an interview with someone. Other people might have done some vetting prior, but by the time they come in, you're going to have a chat and you're going to be compelled to listen to your gut feeling. If you are a high I, a high S especially, potentially as a high D as well. As a C, you'll probably go by going on facts and figures and data instead. You might be slightly different. But notice now, 88% of the people would be inclined to have a cognitive bias sneaking in, and what I call clone themselves in the next hire. Why is that? Because we're all very much are challenged by what we call the narcissism effect. If you remember the whole story about Narcissus, the beautiful looking man looks over the pond, sees his own reflection in the water, and falls in love with his own reflection. Guess what? You and I, if we're not mindful of cognitive biases like this, that we clone ourselves in our next hires, when we're not mindful of this, we will be like Narcissus and we will fall in love with the reflection of ourselves in someone else. So if they sound like us, look like us, talk like us, value things like us, behave like us, we are inherently biased to give that person preference over another candidate that is different to us. I've seen time and time again that people just clone themselves in the next hire. That means then, as a business owner or a sales director, you want to be very mindful as to who does your vetting for you. Because if they don't know, for example, what salespeople or what selling requires, because an HR person is not a salesperson, equally, a recruiter is not necessarily a salesperson. If they have no sales experience, they might very easily slot in the things that will set up an excellent salesperson and see it as a negative because they aren't like that. Whether that it's the right attribute for the job or not, that is very risky. I've seen salespeople being recruited by HR, for example, and other recruiters who were very S, who then recruited other nurturers and carers like them in sales roles, only then to see that the business wasn't growing because they were more looking after existing clients rather than go out and hunt for new clients, which is more something that relates to I's and D's, the hunting part. There's nurturers here, which is more S and green, and there's more hunting, which is more yellow and red. And that's very different. You got your hunter-gatherers, you got your nurturers. They're very different. So be mindful of the narcissism effect. And don't hire people just because they sound like you or look like you or you feel an easy connection, personally speaking. That might really be the wrong selection criterion. Myth 8 then here says there is a single sales process standardized for best results. And this is basically walking in the footsteps of your car manufacturing where everything is a production line. Or if you bring it to hospitality, McDonald's, which has all the manuals worked out on how to bake fries and flip burgers. And it's all very much prescribed and there's only one right way of doing it. Guess what? If you are thinking of sales as a one way of doing, that there's the standardized way of doing. If you just go back to the stats that we started off this episode with, you know that if the standardized way is high D, it's only going to relate to and resonate with 18% of the Australian population. Now, again, those stats are also available for other countries. But bear in mind, for most Western countries, the stats are very similar to Australia, with a few base points off, below or above, but they're pretty similar. Communist countries, quite different. I would imagine that African countries would be quite different too. Yeah, but let's just say by and large, if your standardized sales process is very D, that sales process is going to be very fast-paced. It's going to be very urgency-driven. It's going to be incentivizing people. It's going to be negotiating on price and discounts, very price-driven. It's going to be looking at deals, and it's going to be very transactional in nature. All of this will resonate with some buyers, but it will put a lot of people off because it's too pushy, too quick, too direct, too blunt, too aggressive. You get the gist. Equally now, if you are going in with more of a thought leadership type of selling or a trusted advisory type of selling, you're going to go in with facts sharing. You're going to be sharing information. You're going to write blogs and articles that you're going to be sharing, and you're going to be divulging information with people. And you'll think, because you're a subject matter expert and you're having a lot of access to information, and that by sharing this information and being the custodian of that information and channeling that information, you'll think that is going to be the reason why people will buy, because you know what you're talking about. Guess what? That is a very analytical, very C or blue type of selling. And that is only going to be impactful with other C's like you. That sales process is only going to resonate with a lot of accountants, engineers, researchers, analysts, project managers, perhaps, to some extent, the bankers that are very much into the nitty-gritty of details. These are going to be the people that relate to that. The researchers, the surgeons, the people that are very much about precision, they will easily relate to that way of selling and buying. But not the others. 88% will disassociate with that sort of way of buying. They just don't do it that way. For example, think of network marketing. Network marketing is a very smartly designed system to pull in the biggest chunk of people, the biggest group in a Western country like Australia. 36% of Australians buy hype, by big events, lots of people, music, flashlights, putting people on stages, people sharing their story, people sharing their experience, testimonials, and so on and so forth. And then, of course, incentive trips, getting off to vacations with great people and all expenses paid by your network marketing company. This is very much designed and staged to attract the high eyes first, that we know also, by the way, are great advocates of things when they get really passionate about it. Therefore, they're good at selling it, at enlisting people in their downline. There's a lot more psychology behind this than what you might think when you look at face value. There's a lot more to it. Then the last one is if your sales process is very much about, we do it on referrals. We've been in business for a long time, and all of it is word of mouth. If you're that type of person, that sort of style is very S. It means you're not comfortable to create your own future, and you rather rely on what is brought to you by other people. It's basically waiting for the low-hanging fruit to fall in your lap. It's very reactive. It's very passive. It's not proactive at all. And so if your business is plateauing, maybe slightly declining, or barely growing, that in itself is an indication that it's probably time to step outside of your one-sided way of looking at your sales process and expanding the opportunities more to set yourself up for success rather than failure. It's predictable to having failure in advance. And so with that being said, that was myth 8. Let's now go to myth 9, pitch to the decision maker. If you are in negotiating, if you are in business development or sales of any kind, we sometimes get trapped in a cognitive bias where our belief system thinks that there's just one person that we got to find whose approval we need. But in today's environment, whether it is more for our personal life or for our business life, chances are that there's multiple people that are at least influencing a purchasing decision. The sale depends on multiple people needing to have their say and be good with it. And so the first thing that I'd like you to think about is, who are all the people that will be leading or influencing the decision making internally? Now, whether that is a couple, husband and wife, or two partners that have come and see a house, there's two people there. Don't just look at the one person. I've heard real estate agents say this. You got to focus on the woman and sell the house to the woman. Guess what? If the husband is really not liking the way you go about it, chances are that the husband is going to sabotage the deal in the background, right? It's not just the one person that will make the call. Equally, you might think that if you're in boardrooms and you sell to people in boardroom environments, you might think that it's just the person with the biggest title is going to be the decision maker. But guess what? If even one of the other people sitting next to them, or even the receptionist, has a bad thing to say about how you dealt with them, that is going to sabotage your future. It's not just about one decision maker. There is multiple people, and it's our job as great advisors, as trusted people, as subject matter experts, whatever you want to call yourself, consultant, is that you find out who are the people whose opinions will be valued so that you can bring them in, make them part of the formula, and come out with a pitch, a proposal that ticks the box for everyone. That is where the magic kicks in. So that's pitch number 9 now. Myth number 10 says submit tenders only as per requirements. Now that's an interesting one. For all of you who go into blind tenders because the government or any large multinational uses a procurement way of doing things, bear in mind that procurement and this whole tendering process that is blind is designed to be a sausage factory. A sausage factory means that they control the whole process. They squeeze everything through the machine. And at the end, the machine is designed to spit out sausages, as you can imagine. Whether you love sausages yourself as a business owner or a salesperson or a BDM, or you don't and you're vegetarian or vegan, or you just happen to like other things. You like your steak pure cut rather than mixed and matched. Notice now is that as soon as you step into the tendering process like that, the procurement process, is that you are going through the sausage factory whether you like it or not. And out in the end, you will come out as a sausage. I don't personally believe that's the best use of time and resources, especially knowing that the more money is at stake, the more time goes into putting the documents together. So I always look for ways to bypass the sausage machine and at least be able to influence the decision making early on before it goes to tender. Then we have a higher likelihood of success. Then our strike rate increases and goes up to more like the 100% rather than a mediocre 5%, 10%, 15%, 20%. That is not good enough in my book. So submit tenders only as per requirements. The second thing that I wanted to share on that is that a client of ours has done very well with closed tenders, and they basically then have submitted 2 proposals. One, which is conforming the criteria of the tender. But they also then thought it through and thought, it looks like this client could benefit from an other solution than the one that they actually asked us to quote us on. So we're going to write that tender as well, and we're going to submit them simultaneously. A conforming one and a non-conforming tender. Interesting. Because they put two quotes in, not just the one, their strike rate just because of that dramatically increases. And because everybody else sounds the same, looks the same because of the brief that they all kept to, the non-conforming tender looks different, sounds different, and creates more intrigue. Now, human brains are designed to always look for intrigue, for something new, something that is brought to our attention, that gets us new ideas, that makes us see the world differently. And that is highly sought after. Therefore, if you ever do with tenders, having the conforming one and the non-conforming one sets yourself up for success more so than anything else. Myth now 11, and we're almost there, guys. If you're already so far with me on the podcast, I commend you for being persistent and seeing things through all the way till the end. So great job. Myth number 11 now says it's a numbers game. We hear this time and time again. And I just would like to share with you that it doesn't have to be like that. It's not a numbers game. I personally believe that quantity, yes, there is a thing like that. You need X amount of hours to become a great coach. You need X amount of training to become great at any skill. I get that. Yes. But then there's also the qualitative part that I think is straight away missed when you subscribe to the notion that it's a numbers game. Qualitative means that, for example, if you're in sales, is that you actually vet how you pitch, not just look at the solution and the pricing and the terms and the conditions, but that you actually look at who am I pitching it to? What's the psychology here? Who are these people that I'm influencing? What are their needs? What are their wants? What's their language on this? How do I need to pitch this in order for my value to land well and be recognized as valuable? That is a whole new ballgame. And that's where qualitative beats quantitative. And it's very easy for me to say this because if I'm looking at numbers games and everything so far that we touched so far, you would basically then say that for every X tenders you write, that X% would fall away because you missed them for whatever reason, from some obscure reason. But what if it's very predictable and preventable which ones you bond on? What if the pitch came out the complete wrong way for the buyer? Now suddenly we're talking qualitative. If you get the qualitative piece right, as many of our students from our course Communication Mastery have experienced themselves, strike rates have gone as high as 95%, which means they're basically relating to every person, no matter where they sit on the disc, convey the value in a way that the client wants to see it, and then they buy easily and quickly, better than anything else we've seen. Now contrast this with HubSpot's data. This is data from 2023, where HubSpot has seen that the average conversion ratio in sales and business development is 20% across industries. Isn't that a huge difference between 20 and 95% of people in our network, the ones that we trained in our process, our thinking, our processes, and the like? So this is really what is possible out there when you know how to speak the 4 different languages. Last one, knowledge is power. We say that very often, and I personally disagree big time, because I see so many people that learn something somewhere and it sits in their head and they never put it to work, or they only did it once, it didn't work well, and then they canned it, meaning they didn't stick at it long enough for the skill to be developed at a mastery level, and therefore they let it go. Guess what? It's not knowledge that is power. It's applied knowledge that is power. And so applied knowledge means you got to put in the time and the effort, and you got to sustain it long enough and receive feedback along the way from somebody who's already there, so that you can tweak, rehearse, practice, and drill and get really great at the basics. Ask any great coach in sports what really is the most important thing, and all he's going to say, first of all, get great at the basics before you do anything else. I think it was Bruce Lee who said, I don't fear the guy who's practiced 100 kicks, 1,000 kicks 100 times. I fear the one who practiced one kick 1,000 times, because that way he's gotten way more hours in and he's learned mastery for that one kick only. And so with that being said, I walked you through now all of the 12 myths in my book, How to Communicate for Results and Feel Great. And I hope that you got a lot from this podcast. I would love for you to drop some comments down under the video on YouTube, because this video is going to go out there as well. Any thoughts or questions, always feel free to reach out on LinkedIn or on our website. And obviously, it would be a pleasure to see you and welcome you sometime to either become a reader of my book or become an alumni of our best-selling course, Communication Mastery, which teaches this stuff at the next level. Thank you again for joining in to the Energize with Bram podcast. I very much look forward to seeing you again very soon. Bye-bye.